Divorced, beheaded, died. Divorced, beheaded, survived. If you only know one thing, well, two things about Henry VIII, it's probably that he was very fat and that he had 6 wives. Well, surely these things are true, right? He was a great big fat man who chopped off his wife's head and end of story. Yes? No? Well, no. Hang on. No. Really? Well, okay, sort of. Well, in later life, the king was indeed overweight. He was a big man, he was an active man, and he ate big meals. But as a young man, he was tall, fit, athletic, and very active, and he needed a lot of fuel to keep him fit and well. However, a jousting accident in January of 1536 left a 44-year-old King Henry injured, in pain for the remainder of his life, unable to walk properly, sometimes unable to walk at all, and with a much, much less active life. But he didn't eat any less, or very little less. So age, infirmity and constant pain, along with his lifestyle of somewhat excess, they all took their toll, and with the food and drink, he just gained a lot of weight. Measuring his armour shows that between his 20s and his 50s, the monarch, standing more than 6 foot, his waist grew by more than 20 inches. From 32 inches in his 20s to 52 inches later in life. And his chest expanded from 39 to 53 inches. By the time of his death in 1547, at the age of 56, it's thought he's likely to have weighed as much as 28 stone. So, in the later years of his reign, he did indeed pile on the pounds. But as a young man, and for the majority of his life, he was tall, fit, and active. In fact, an ambassador at the Tudor court reported, "His Majesty is the most handsomest potentiate I have ever set eyes on. Above the usual height, with an extremely fine calf to his leg and a round face, so very beautiful it would become a pretty woman." And that's all well and good in terms of weight, but he had 6 marriages, 6 queens, so he had 6 wives, right? Well, not exactly. You see, being somewhat pedantic, he did have 6 marriages, but they didn't all count. Half of his marriages were annulled by the English Catholic Church, and an annulment declares that a true marriage just never took place, unlike a divorce in which a married couple end the union, end the marriage. So technically, the marriages didn't happen. So whilst he had 6 queens, not all crowned, only 3 of them were his wives. It's commonly held by people that Henry broke from Rome and founded his own church because the Pope wouldn't give him a divorce. But in fact, he was asking for an annulment from his first marriage to Catherine of Aragon. She'd been married to Henry's brother Arthur, which required papal dispensation for Henry's marriage to go ahead, because a family link through marriage was considered to be the same as a link through blood, making her Henry's sister in fact as well as in law. But with one daughter, a host of tragically failed pregnancies, and children who died as very young infants, during more than 20 years of marriage, Henry needed an heir. So he sought the Pope's approval for annulment on the grounds that Catherine had first been his brother's wife. He used a passage from the Old Testament, Leviticus chapter 20, verse 21. If a man shall take his brother's wife, it is an impurity. He hath uncovered his brother's nakedness. They shall be childless. But the Pope refused. Henry broke with Rome. He ordered Thomas Cranmer, the Archbishop of Canterbury, to annul the marriage, and he quickly married Anne Boleyn, with whom he'd already exchanged secret vows of marriage, which may or may not have had some legitimacy and legal basis based on 16th century marriage, because it's not the same as modern marriage. Anne was Henry's second marriage, but now became his first and only wife. But despite quickly bearing the king another child, another daughter, no son was forthcoming, and Henry appeared much more enamoured with her during their courtship than during marriage. So the king quickly grew tired of her, and the archbishop had this marriage annulled. Then Cranmer took it one stage further and arranged for her to be arrested, imprisoned and tried for adultery, incest and high treason, for which she was found guilty of and beheaded on the 19th of May 1536. Jane Seymour followed, becoming again the first wife, gave the king a son and then tragically died, leaving Henry grief-stricken, and she was the only one of his wives or queens or people that he had a marriage ceremony with to ever get a queen's burial. Anne of Cleves came next. She married Henry, though was never formally crowned, but they soon split up and Henry asked for another annulment, citing a pre-contract of marriage with Francis I, Duke of Lorraine, even though that marriage never took place. Anne did not resist the annulment. She'd possibly learnt from previous queens, and she claimed the marriage hadn't been consummated and was rewarded with a generous settlement, which included Hever Castle, the former home of the Boleyns, Henry's former in-laws, and was given the name the King's Sister and became a lifelong friend to him and to his children. She outlived the king and all of his wives, dying at Chelsea Old Manor on the 16th of July 1557. Catherine Howard, then, the Rose without a thorn, was much, much younger than Henry, just a teenager when they wed, but she was soon stripped of her title and then beheaded in 1542 on the grounds of treason for committing adultery. But her marriage wasn't annulled, so she was the second wife, which just left Catherine Parr, who was the last wife who did much to unify the king's household, was in some ways responsible for a reconciliation between daughters that the king had made into bastards and to the king, and was in many ways as much nurse as wife, and who managed to survive him, along with the two previous husbands she had before marrying a fourth time after Henry's death, making her the most married queen in English history and Henry's third wife.